Good morning and welcome to Behind the Screen. I am JM. This is the Iconic Production channel, and Behind the Screen is just a show where we step behind the screen. We talk about things from a game designer and a game master's perspective. We do book reviews, we do adventure design, we do monster design, we look at literary influences. It's sort of a variety show, but things that will have helped me become a better game designer and a better game master, and hopefully that they'll provide that with you. Now, I titled this episode Mea Culpa, and then we're going to talk about some exciting things on the Iconic Production channel. But the reason I'm titling it a Mea Culpa, if you listen to episode 31, I definitely talked about a Riffs game that I ran at Petrie's Family Games, and I said that it was my buddies Luke and Calvin and Mark who were running that game with me. And immediately as I finished the episode, I remembered it wasn't Mark, it was my good friend Christopher, who is sometimes in the chat under the name Praetorian. Sorry about that, Christopher. You are a valued friend and a valued co-GM of that game. I did not mean to make that mistake. So hopefully this sets the record straight, and Chris can strike this out of his book of grudges, which is a literal book that he keeps grudges in. He's a dwarf player from Warhammer, and I'm sure I'm in there multiple times for all of the times my elves stomped on his dwarves, or my Bretonians, or my dark elves. Yeah, there was a lot of Warhammer played during those days. So Chris, if you're listening to this, I hope you can forgive me for that oversight. Rook, always good to see you. Thank you for your generosity. Bob, good to see you as well. So it's good that Bob and Rook are here because we're talking about we're going to continue our talk about Savage Worlds. Matthias, good to see you. Glad to have you here. Uh, uh, Matthias and I have been talking about Pathfinder and game design over on Twitter, and I'm glad to have him in the chat this morning. So, we talked about Savage World and Savage Rifts, and how I kind of came back to the Savage World ecosystem through Rifts. And now I said I always was aware of Savage Worlds. My good friend Calvin loves, and my friend Cam, they love Savage Worlds, and they love the Deadlands setting. And I had read Deadlands. I was very enamored with this idea of the Reckoners being the horsemen of the apocalypse, and what was going on in there. And so when we've been announced, if you follow us on Instagram or on social media, or have tuned in on the Torg channel or listened to Behind the Screens, you know that we were talking about that we're going to be running Savage Worlds on the stream on Monday nights. We're going to be going through the Horror at Headstone Hill, which is a great little mystery adventure set in Deadlands. And Bob and Rook will be playing in that with me, as well as my good friend Lily, who played Perpetua in the Fading Suns game, and Edith in the Horseman Torg game, and our producer JD, who has been on a variety of streams here on the Iconic Production channel. So I'm really excited to show off the art, the overlays, the characters that we're going to have. But today we're going to talk about Deadlands for a number of reasons. You know, Bob's in here, so I figure he can learn through osmosis some of the stuff that we're going to be going over on our pre-stream game that's happening next week. So, Deadlands is the core of Savage Worlds, right? The system was originally made for Deadlands, and then sort of expanded out into what is now considered the Savage Worlds sort of generic system. So Deadlands is a Weird West game. And so for me, if you've watched our Torg stream, you know how much I love genre mashups. That's one of the things that I love about Torg. It's not just one thing, it's all things. And so Deadlands takes the Western setting, which is, at least, I've never played in it in a role-playing game, but I love the genre. Tombstone, True Grit, the Man with No Name trilogy, the Magnificent Seven, both versions. I think that the remake actually was a worthy and entertaining successor. You can fight me on this. Bob is correct, but the main My main love of Westerns is expressed in my love of the Dark Tower series by Stephen King. Especially the Gunslinger. The Gunslinger and really the Dark Tower are the most westerny of those of that series. But yes, I mean it inspired the comic that Bob and I were drawing, are working on, that Bob was drawing on his stream. We've got some great ideas and some great art there, and Bob is just if you haven't heard me talk about Bob before, Bob has this amazing ability to sort of reach into my brain and pull out what I'm thinking and put it on page. It's not a mystical ability. Bob spent years explaining to me how art critique work and how art direction should go. And so I owe all of that to Bob. But so I also enjoy Cthulhu Down Darker Trails, which is another Western with sort of the Cthulhu mythos. But what Savage has done, Shane Hensley and his team, they took a slightly different tack. It's not just the Western with a layer of mythology on it. They've made it into its own setting. So the Civil War has gone on longer. Essentially what happened is the Civil War is extended because of this development of magic returning and this uncovering of a substance called ghost rock. It's found initially in California, but then throughout the rest of the United States. Deadwood, another great Western that I enjoy. Excuse me, I have a cup of tea. There's ghost rock mines there. And essentially, the balance of power shifted. Ghost rock burns hotter and faster than coal. It also screams with the wails of the damned, but most people kind of ignore that. And it has led to a rise in what we would most kind of consider like a steampunk era technology. So think of Wild Wild West, the TV show if you can, the movie if you must. So that kind of continues the war and more people die. And so now we're kind of post-Civil War, but it's extended a little bit longer. And magic has returned. Magic has returned in a very violent and dark way. While yes, those who are blessed, so shamans and priests, can call upon their religious traditions to kind of aid them. You also have hucksters who are card playing. They play cards with Manitou, with these demonic spirits for magical power. And in the original game that I was reading, you actually would draw a hand of cards and figure out, when you cast a spell, and figure out what was the best possible hand you could get. And that's how well the spell went off. So everything has sort of this dark tinge to it. Hucksters deal with Manitou, these demons, for magic. There are things like Harrowed, like people come back from the dead and they're reanimated by these Manitou, and they're mostly in control of themselves, but sometimes the Manitou takes over. You've got this advance of technology like we saw in the 1800s that led to even more death under the guise of advancement, right? Look at the Great Continental Railroad stories, and you will see that the railways and the advancement were paved with the lives of people who were just abused and put in these situations to try and connect both sides of the U.S. by rail. And so in the midst of all of this, you have all of your typical Western tropes. Ex-soldiers moving west to go to boom towns, people trying to find their fortunes, the Native Americans and indigenous tribes, because of magic, have developed two of their own nations kind of in the midst of what we would consider the Great Western Expanse. You have the Sioux nations in the north, kind of between Montana and Dakota, and then the Coyote Confederation splits Oklahoma from Missouri and Arkansas. And so you have all of these tropes. You have cowboys, you have the native and indigenous peoples trying to survive in the face of westward expansion. You have boom towns, you have silver mines, you have prospectors, you have people flocking west, trying to, the east is sort of the basis of civilization, and it gets wilder and wilder as you move west. But on top of that, there are things that go bump in the night, and there is an actual level. Fear is not just something that is abstracted in this game, right? This is a game of the Weird West, and is a horror aspect and a horror element to the game. And mechanically, I always love when games take a theme and make it a mechanical element, right? You can say your game is about X, but if there's nothing on the character sheet and there's no mechanics tied to it, your game isn't really about X. Let's take D&D, for example. I love D&D. I play 2nd edition D&D every week. I've written stuff for 5th edition D&D. I'm continuing to work on stuff for 5th edition D&D. We wrote stuff for 4th edition D&D. You have these things like bonds and ideals, and they're on your character sheet, but the only mechanical benefit is advantage if the GM remembers and if the player remembers. There's no concrete tie to the game mechanics aside from, again, this, the inspiration token. Compare that, if you will, to RuneQuest, where you have something similar. You have passions, you have hatreds and loyalties and loves. They work a lot like your bonds, your ideals, these things. But there is a mechanical benefit. You have a skill percentage attached to it. And if you roll your passion before you make a skill roll, if it would influence it, you can actually raise your skill because of your passion. If you are fighting brew and you have the hatred of brew passion, you can try and invoke that passion in order to get a bonus on all of your combat things to kill brew. That's well-designed mechanics. Now, one complaint I've heard about Savage is a lot of people don't like generic game systems, right? They want the game to be fine-tuned to the setting you're in. And one thing I've noticed about Savage Worlds, at least in the 3 things I've been looking at, Deadlands, Rifts, and their new Pathfinder stuff that is coming out, they do a good job of taking the base game and adding on setting rules in order to make the game even more flavored for that system. So if you want to learn one system and yet still have it feel unique depending on the setting, Savage is a great way to go. So for example, this is the Deadlands core book. You can get it for $40. It's a great deal. Hardcover book, same size as like a graphic trade paperback for comic books. But in addition to things like special archetypes and special character advancements, they give you special rules, and the one I'm talking about here is fear. So the creatures behind all of this change to the world, and I don't want to get too deep into the Reckoners, especially because there's a lot of time travel. There's some Arthurian stuff that's in the latest edition. So we're going to just stick to kind of high level. These creatures, these great spirits, the Reckoners, are attempting to bring about hell on earth. And they do that by raising the fear level in different areas. And so as a player and as a GM in Deadlands, you are constantly understanding that the better the heroes do, the lower the fear goes down. The better the monsters do, or if the heroes ignore things, the fear level goes up. All right, so Bob said, yeah, I guess I never realized it per se, but I do wish D&D had a system, had integral thematic mechanics. Yeah, I think that's not unreasonable. At its core, like we do a lot of things with D&D. I have told everything from dungeon crawl for the whole campaign to courtly romance to high political intrigue games. You can do anything with any system, but that doesn't mean that at the end of the day, the D&D cycle is kill something, get their stuff, so you can kill bigger things, so you can get bigger stuff. The majority of the rules in D&D revolve around the combat experience life cycle. And that's why a lot of times, anytime we try to add something onto that, we are either house ruling it or it's a whole separate subsystem that gets added onto it. Like if you look at Strixhaven, it spends a lot of time just adding a bunch of rules that do feel tacked on to the core D&D experience in order to make these social mechanics work. I think Pathfinder did a great job in both first and second edition of creating subsystems that were both robust enough to feel like something worthy to dig into, and yet tied back mechanically to like the skill list or attributes, things like that. Especially Pathfinder 2, where they basically boiled down, I would say, most of their subsystems to this goal-oriented subsystem where you're trying to get success levels in order to gain enough points to affect some outcome, whether that's mass combat, whether that's chases, whether that's political gain, whether that's exploration and territory control. I think you have to approach these at a core design level, because if you end up adding them on after the fact, a lot of people have already either made their own house rules or it's going to feel bolted on. And anytime you bolt on a new system, especially in the middle of a campaign, it can feel rather jarring, both from players and the DM side. So anyway, fear levels is this thing, kind of bringing it back to where we were at. Fear levels range from 0 to 6, 0 being, hey, this is what the world is normally like. 6 being what is called a deadland, which is just horrifying. It's a full-blown nightmare landscape. The hunting grounds has kind of, which is the spirit realm, has overlaid the material world, and everything generally sucks. And so as you play through Deadlands, there's this tension, this push and pull between the Reckoners trying to increase the fear at a rate that will sort of go, I want to say, unnoticed until it's too late, and the heroes trying to deal with the threats to lower the fear level. And it brings the mechanic of the horror or the terrifying, or even if you look at Westerns, right? Westerns as a genre, the town was safety. And the further you got away from town, the weirder, the stranger, the more violent, the more deadly things became. Fear levels represent that. And there's a lot of other little mechanics in here that are pretty slick, and I really enjoy. I enjoy the way they've changed hucksters. Your spells go off like a skill, but you can always wager and gamble against your Manitou to get a better effect or more power points. The Harrowed, those people who have come back from the dead, sometimes Manitous infest heroes because they, as much as they enjoy evil perpetuating itself, they also really enjoy tarnishing a bright soul and causing them to damn themselves long after they should have gone to their eternal reward. So you get a lot in this little book. Now, you do need the core Savage Worlds book to get the base rules. All of these rules kind of like add on top of that. But for $40, you get how to make Western heroes, all of the goods and gears you will need, some general looks at the life and the settings in the game, Marshall-specific setting rules, and this is how we dial in Savage to the type of game we want to play. And again, even if you don't want to play Deadlands, it's always worth looking at these additional rule books because they show you how the core Savage game can be twisted and you can make new rules for a setting. So, for example, I'm looking at doing a superhero game set in a fantasy world with Savage, where the longer you wear the mask, the more you lose your identity. And I was able to adapt that juicer burn die to represent sort of this law. You know, the more you lean into your superhero identity, the more powerful you become, but the less you're able to transition back into your normal life. So you keep getting these bigger bonuses, and every time the bonus rolls maximum, your level goes up. But again, I picked that up by looking at the Savage Rift's setting specific rules and twisting them and cherry picking the ones I wanted for my superhero setting. So yeah, and then you get monsters and encounters, and how to make the Weird West your own. So Deadlands is, again, sort of, I would say, the flagship product of Savage Worlds. And there's two ways to get it. You can get this book, or if you've got $100, you can get this box set from their website. And it comes with the core rulebook. It comes with a great map of the setting, which I'm not going to pull out. Archetype cards, which are essentially pre-generated characters. My characters are, or my players in the Savage, or in the Horror at Headstone Hill, are going to be using the archetype cards. Cool little ammo counters. You get all of the bennies that you need, the dice, an action deck that is themed for this. So they pack a lot of things in here. You get templates. It is $100, but for the fact that you're getting a $40 rulebook and then a GM screen and a bunch of other things, I think it's well worth it. The other thing that they have, they've got adventure books. They've got small campaigns. They've got Foundry modules. If you are on Foundry, Savage is a great game to buy into on Foundry because they have a ton of. I think they have all of their current products are fully supported on Foundry, and you can just download them off the Pinnacle website, which I'll put in the show notes, and import them into Foundry and get going. They have the Horror at Headstone Hill box set, which is also on Foundry, and this is the campaign we're going to be running. So I don't want to give too much away, but essentially an agent goes missing in this town in Wyoming, a mining town, and the heroes are sent in to figure out what happened to him because there have been a lot of reports that he was sending back of strangeness and weirdness going on in this mining town. And so the heroes are going to come in, they get embroiled in a mystery, and they end up having to stop a really cool threat. I don't want to spoil it because I have two of my players in here, but if you have lived in Colorado or Wyoming, you inevitably hear about this threat in a much more positive way. It is dark and twisted in the Horror at Headstone Hill, and I'm really excited to run it and show it off on the stream. But this box set, I believe, is $30, and you get just a ton of things. You get event cards, maps, handouts for your players, creature cards, pawns, a unique wild card die. You get the campaign. You get a little player's introduction that's like a little 8-page book to send out to your players to share with them. I really love Savage Worlds. I enjoy Savage Rifts. I love Deadlands. I'm really excited to see the fantasy and the superhero companion come out. And at some point, I'm just going to bite the bullet. And they have a Savage Pathfinder where they have one box set is the bestiary, the character creation rules, all of the setting material for adapting Golarion to Savage Worlds. And then they adapted in a second box set the complete Rise of the Rune Lords campaign setting and adventure path for Pathfinder. So if you love Pathfinder but are looking for something that's a little bit more heroic and quick, and more less D20, more wild and explosive, you can port all of that Golarion knowledge directly into Savage Worlds Pathfinder, which I believe is available. It was on Backer Kit the last time I looked at it, but you may be able to get it over at the Pinnacle Entertainment Group website. Again, links for these products that we've talked about and to the Pinnacle Entertainment Group will be below. If you like what you've heard, if you like Savage Worlds, if the sound of a Weird West magical steampunk horror game sounds interesting, you should come check out on June 6th our inaugural launch of our Horror at Headstone Hill stream. It is going to be Savage Worlds. Again, as I said, Bob, Lily, and JD and Rook will be playing. We're going to... It'll be a great introduction to the Savage Worlds game and the Deadlands setting if you've never played either, because most of my players haven't played either. Rook is the one person who has experience with Savage Worlds. Everyone else is sort of new to Deadlands and to Savage Worlds. And hopefully we'll be getting to do more of these streams. So if you like it, show up, follow, support. Let us show Pinnacle, hey, here's what we're bringing in viewership-wise and new player-wise to the Savage Worlds market, and we would love to continue to run. I'd love to do a Pathfinder game. I'd love to do a superhero game with Savage Worlds. I'd love to do a Rifts game with Savage Worlds. We're going to play for about 12 to 14 sessions, kind of see how long it takes us, and go from there. So that has been kind of my overview of Deadlands and Savage Worlds. I hope you guys enjoyed it. It's always fun to talk about this game. If you like what we're doing, please consider following us here on Twitch. If you show up and Rook is in the chat, you may be gifted with a subscription. Follow us on YouTube. Give us a thumbs up on this video. Follow us on social media. We've been posting a lot of information about the Deadlands game that is coming up. You can find us on Twitter and on Instagram and on Facebook. You can follow us at our website. All of that information is in the notes below, and I'm really excited to be running this game in June with our players. And that does not mean that we're not going to be running Torg. The FET 5 will continue on. The big finale of the first adventure arc is Tuesday. It's going to be a big combat between the FET 5 and the sorceress Nabateans. So if you like ancient Near East mythology, techno body horror, pulp superhero adventures, come check out the FET 5 on Tuesday nights. And this Saturday at 8 a.m. Central, we will be airing the next episode of the Grand Campaign. We're talking about resources. It's going to be a 2 or 3 episode arc on what resources do you need as a GM to really kind of put together a good Grand Campaign. So that's it for me on this Behind the Screen. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Game Master Matt, for joining, and Bob and Rook. It's always good to see everybody. I will see you all on Tuesday when we talk about something and step behind the screen again. I don't know what we're going to talk about. We may finish up the campaign clinic because I still have several questions that need to be answered. So until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, stay gaming. It's always good to see all of you. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Behind the Screen. Have a good one.